feel, or at least, I hope that we have a warm and welcoming vibe to our podcast, which I feel we do. So then it's always nice when you can get people on and they're like, oh my gosh, it was actually fun. And I was like, thank you.
My mom started listening to our podcast this week. My mom's busy. Yeah, she writes me and she goes, how do I make comments on iHeartRadio? Because I can't figure it out and I want to make so many comments. You guys are so fun. And I'm like, oh, thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom. I can for a fact guarantee that none of my family members listen to my podcast.
Well, I'm in a hot chocolate mood today. What you drinking?
I'm actually in a passion fruit and cranberry mood today. And oh my goodness, as I was making it, I was like, oh, this smells so delish. Like, it smells so yummy.
I like your blue cup too. That's cute.
Thank you. It's always sad when it smells better than it tastes. It's like vanilla essence. Not that it tastes bad, it just tastes like normal tea. It's not anything extraordinary is what I'm going with. But cheers. So, are we ready for episode 2 of season 2?
Let's do this.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Tea and Tales. I'm Madeleine Einau.
And I'm Sarah Sampson. Thank you to everybody for listening to us and joining us, especially Maria March and Kat Caldwell. Thank you so much for commenting and sharing. And we are excited today because we have a guest speaker, and her name is Clare Draycott.
You're completely doing this the wrong way. You should be like, sugar, spice, and everything nice. These were the ingredients chosen to create the perfect little girls. But Professor Utonium accidentally added an extra ingredient to the concoction, Chemical X. Thus, the Powerpuff Girls were born, using their superpowers. Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup has dedicated their lives to fighting crimes and the forces of evil. Bum, 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 bum.
And today, the Powerpuff Girls will be talking about networking and writer groups. Let's absolutely bring on our friend, Clare Draycott.
Hello.
Hello. How are you, my friends?
We're fantastic.
I think this episode has been coming for a long time. We're so excited that we have you here and might try to make you a regular guest if you like it.
Bless you, that's really kind.
It's just because we have 3 different accents now, so we like to confuse people, that's why.
Actually, although this is called Tea and Tales, and I'm British, so I'm supposed to really love tea. I might get thrown out of the country for saying this, but I really, really can't stand tea at all. If you've ever seen a cat with a fur ball, that's me if I have to drink tea.
Wow.
So I've got peppermint tea today. That's
okay.
That's as tea as I can get, my peppermint tea.
Cheers.
Look at the cup.
Oh my gosh. Okay, this is unfair now. Can I go get my cup? What's happening here?
I thought as we were talking about writing groups, it made sense to bring my pitch to publish mug with me.
I'm going to have to go get my cup. It's fine.
Well, it's perfect because we all met in the same writer group. And one of the funnest things that group does is mugs people, as in giving them mugs.
Cheers.
Cheers. For those of you who are listening, we have ones that say hope and believe, bestsellers list ahead. And then Claire says,
keep calm and trust your peeps.
So many of our episodes have alluded to writer groups, so I'm kind of excited to be doing this episode all about it. And I think that your cup, Claire, sums it up. Trust your peeps. Like, if you're struggling, if you're having a hard time, you got to go trust your peeps.
Yeah, and that's the whole joy of being in a writer's group, is that there are peeps that you can trust. Writing is so solitary. And if you don't belong to a writing group, then you're really just out in the cold. I certainly have found that the writing is a lot easier since I joined Pitch to Published and other groups, and actually started to learn about the craft of writing, and also how to pitch, how to query.
In all honesty, I never even knew what querying was until I joined a writer's group. Like, I didn't even know you had to do a query letter. I was just like, what is this query and where do I buy it? Because what's happening over here? So I have learned a tremendous amount of things in writers groups that I've joined, and I've met a tremendous amount of people. They are your support. They are your foundation of this writing industry.
I've got a degree in law, and so I thought, I can write a formal letter. I mean, how hard can it be? I had penned my first attempt at a query letter, and then I got to the end of editing my very first novel, and I'd been posting to say that I was nearly finished. So, of course, Facebook algorithms being what they are, up came an advert for Get a Book Deal 101, which is the Kathy for X online course, and it tends to be the gateway to Pitch to Published. I think it was called something snappy like 10 errors new writers make when querying an agent or something like that. And I thought, oh, well, mine will be fine, but this is a free webinar, so I'll just do it just to make sure. And I was about an hour into the webinar, and I'd made 8 of the 10 errors, and I thought, oh my goodness me, I really need some help.
You're doing great, Claire.
And then Kathy said, today you can join and get the course. And I was like, where's my credit card? Oh my goodness. And I'm so glad that I did. Best decision I ever made, because I've learned so much in Pitch to Published about the craft of writing, which I discovered I knew very little about. My first novel I'd written with an omniscient narrator, and when I put it in front of agents at a conference, they kind of went, no. If I hadn't belonged to Pitch to Publish, there's no way I would have sorted it out. I think that's, the situation that a lot of people are in. You've got a story to tell, you sit down, you start to write, and you think because you've gone from beginning to end and it all kind of roughly hangs together, you've done the job. You discover, actually, no, that's the beginning of the job. There's a lot more to do.
With a long journey. You've just finished, I think it's your second novel that you wrote, but it was the first one that you wanted to start querying. But then you're like, hold your horses. Clearly this is not ready. And then you went back and you went to go edit it again. How long has it been for you working on this one?
So the current novel, which is my second novel, has taken me 3 years. I was lucky in the sense that in the pandemic, I saw an advert for an online auction, and I won a manuscript review with Kate Nunn, who's one of my favourite authors. And she gave me some ideas to get me started again, as well as lots and lots of other really brilliant advice.
We talk a lot about finding your genre and being able to pin it down.
I'm concentrating on sort of contemporary commercial fiction, or otherwise known as book club fiction. I wouldn't describe it as women's fiction simply because women's fiction tends to be focused on a relationship, and that's not my focus. My focus is, why do people do the things they do and make the decisions that they make, and then what results from that.
For you to be able to pin it down like that, to be like, I'm here, therefore I move it this way into this commercial fiction instead of over here. I love that.
It's taken some work. That's another thing that joining Pitch to Published and Jericho Writers, actually, which is an English group that I belong to, but it made me focus on what is it I'm actually writing and who am I writing it for? Because obviously you really need to be able to answer those questions. At the point that you send out your query, you've got to know who to send it to, and you've got to know how to pitch it. And you can't do either of those things if you haven't really nailed down what your genre is, who your target audience is.
And thank you for bringing up Jericho Writers, because there are so many types of groups. Like, you have your business type that are more like Jericho Writers and Pitch to Publish, but you also have associations like the Fantasy Writers Association that are national or international groups. Some of them are closed to people unless you're published. But then you also have, like here in the United States, we have localized groups. In Maryland, I had the Maryland Writers Association. And here in Utah, I have the Utah Writers League. What kind of other types of writer groups do you participate in? Some
people do better in person, and so if you have got one in your area, you can go to and actually meet real life people in the flesh. Because I'm chronically ill, I find it's easier to do things over the internet, and I can stay at home and access things very easily. So I belong to 3 that are sort of internet based, which is obviously Pitch to Publish, as we've already said, Jericho Writers. And I like Jericho Writers because they do a lot that's focused on craft. But they also have once a year a conference. So that is an opportunity to get together and actually meet people that you've spoken to in the forum or you've communicated with on Twitter. What a lovely writing community there is on Twitter. And then the other one that I've belonged to is Dyslexia, which I've only joined fairly recently. It's just for women writers, and it's based in the UK, but again, like all of the ones that are online, anyone from around the world can join. And they publish a quarterly magazine, so I quite like that because I get something physical in my hand, and it's got articles about writing and the industry, but it's also members can submit poetry and short stories and things. So those are the three that I belong to, but there is a very, very vibrant writing community like your one in Utah, Sarah, in my county as well. And obviously prior to the internet, they were the only ones that were available. So things have expanded dramatically courtesy of the internet. We all know each other really, really well, and we've never actually met in person. But we've become really, really good friends.
I feel like every time I go on Facebook, there's another Facebook writer group just popping up.
I think because I grew up in South Africa, and I did grow up very conservative and very, I want to say, small-minded in a sense. So in all honesty, I never even knew that South Africa had writers. I was like, I didn't think that was a thing. You just think productions were held up on Broadway in New York. So I that's kind of how I grew up. And then I went to America and I discovered, oh no, I can go to Washington, D.C. and go see a production. I don't need to drive all the way to New York to do that. Then I started connecting to writer groups like PTP, and I have this Romance Writers Support League on Facebook, which is great because that's also a place where you can critique other people's novels, or you could be like, hi, could you read my blurb? And then they would read your blurb for you and like give you advice and stuff like that, which is fantastic. And so I kind of built a community in that sense. But then I moved to the Netherlands, and then I went back to South Africa again. And
wow,
I know now that we have South African writers. I know that we have authors here. And it's actually quite a big community that I never would have thought. I actually just have to take that step because I actually had one author, Tamsin Bester, and I connected with her on Instagram, and then she told me that South Africa actually has something similar to the RWA that you have in America. It's something similar that they have in South Africa, and I was like, I actually forgot about that until this very moment. So maybe I should go check that out. Might be a good idea.
I agree.
You agree? Someone's going to keep me accountable because otherwise it probably won't happen, is what I'm saying. That's why we need writer groups.
Yeah, I think you're right. There are so many available and in so many formats. You kind of got to work out what is going to work best for you. Narrow it down because I don't think I would want to be in any more than the three that I'm in because I don't have I don't have time to fully engage in all three as it is because you've got to have time to write.
I feel that point needs to be like put in neon lights. You might be a part of 3 or 4 different groups, and if you're the kind of person who just likes to create your little group, find the one that fits you best and stick with it. You might have different seasons of life where you want a certain type of group, and then maybe you kind of grow to the point as a writer that you're finding you're not getting as much out of that group. Allow yourself to adjust. Decide what is feeding your writing process.
Absolutely, and there's no disloyalty in doing that. It's about doing what furthers your own writing. When I first joined Pitch to Published, I felt very nervous about giving feedback. I didn't really feel like I knew enough to give any feedback. And then you realize actually what you just need to do is give your experience of reading as a reader. You don't have to be all writerly about it. You just need to sort of say, this is how it affected me. This is what it did for me or didn't do for me. Every time you critique someone else's work, it helps with your own. So it's a really useful thing to just see other people's process and other people's writing.
Yeah, I've learned so much from reading and better reading other people's work, which has helped me in my manuscripts. So I'm always for doing your work, but also I always want to say do other people's work because, You can learn a lot from that.
I wanted to also kind of discuss the different writing groups I've been in have done different things. The Utah group here very much focuses on pages. So they're always reading each other's pages and not really focusing on a lot of everything else. But my Maryland group, I still attend them because they're virtual, and they bring in guests almost every month that are published authors who have a lot of experience and be able to say, hey, if you want to be an indie author, come, and this accomplished indie author is going to teach us how to use the software. And that's all they dig deep into using that software. And that's something you don't normally get from places. So are there things that you have seen your writer groups do that are fantastic that maybe we can give some ideas to people for them to do in their writer groups?
I mean, the one that's changed my whole writing experience was when Kathy Barrick allowed us to set up our own rooms, and you set up, actually, didn't you, the Just Right room? And that just allowed us all to say, these 3 hours are our dedicated writing time, and it is sacrosanct. You know, I can go out and do stuff before it, I can go out and do stuff after it, but 1 till 4, my time, different time for both of you, obviously, is my dedicated writing time, and that cannot move. That has to be the same every day. And it got me into that pattern of actually setting aside a specific time. And now I just consider it like I'm going to my job or something. And then obviously through that group, I met both of you, but I also met Gavin Powers, who I know, bless her, she's amazing. With my first novel, I had done everything wrong, basically, and I found out at a conference I'd done everything wrong. And that could have been crushing. It would have been crushing if I had been on my own. But because I had pitched published, I went onto the Facebook page and I said, so, you remember, I said I was going to that conference. Here's what happened. And I gave a little rundown. And I got flooded with responses. It was so kind. And one day I was having a quick chat with Gavin, and I said, I really don't know what to do. I've been trying to learn how to write in close third person, and I don't think I'm getting it. And she said, I can give you a workshop on that. That's what I do. I teach that and that sort of thing, And bless her heart, she gave me a free hour masterclass in how to write in close third person, and it just transformed my writing and my whole experience of writing and my feeling about myself as a writer.
That's fantastic.
Right. What I love about that is every year in November, all of my writers associations will suddenly be like, we have dedicated writing time every Wednesday night or every Friday night. But that room is year round. And writing is year round. To have a room that I can go in there any day during this time, and somebody is likely going to be there saying, what are you working on? Let's get it done. It's huge.
I consider my beta reading group that I have found as a writer's group that I have. And one of the things that I loved about it was a small moment, but to me it meant the world, because as I previously said, every person learns differently, but every person receives feedback differently as well. And it was so funny, not funny haha, but funny, interesting. I'm an actress, so everything I do with facial expressions, because I have to practice on a constant basis. And so every time they would tell me something about my novel, I'll just be like, oh my gosh, I could have sworn I was over this. And they could probably just see it on my face. And so after like the third time that we met up, she's adorable. So Charlotte was like, let's do Nels first, because she clearly doesn't like it when we give her feedback. I was like, no, it's not that I don't like it. I just get very depressed while you're telling me to, but the next day I feel fine. So then she was like, no, but so we know you don't like it, but is there a way that we can convey the feedback differently to you so that you won't feel so negative when we do give it to you? She understands, well, she also is in the, I think, education field, but she understands that different people receive feedback differently or give feedback differently. So that's kind of what I loved about that writers group and the way that they approach things.
Whenever you allow people to read your writing, you're exposing something of yourself. And so you've got to know that you're doing that in an environment where the people are going to be respectful. And, even if they have things to say that need to be changed, and let's face it, we've all got things that we will need to change when we put our work in front of other people. But it has to be done in a respectful way. Otherwise, you simply don't feel safe to let people read it in the first place. So you have to have that kind of approach, I think. And then when you're giving feedback, you've got to be equally aware of, how would I feel, and let's phrase this in a way that is helpful and uplifting. It's not going to pull someone down.
I don't want to be funny, but I feel like this is going to be a two-parter episode because we've been talking a lot and none of it is nonsense. Well, except for my parts, but
No, you're not nonsense, Nell. But we have only gotten halfway through this episode. We still have networking to speak about. Because we like to keep it short here on Tea and Tales, we are going to make this a two-parter. So let's get your fingers back on the keyboard and your pens back on paper.
And if you want to be notified when part 2 will be out because you do not want to miss it, please go follow us on Instagram and Facebook and Threads at Tea and Tales Podcast, and on TikTok and Twitter/X at Podcast Tea Tales. And please go to that purple icon on your device and go give us 5 stars because that will bring us up, 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 up to the top.
Happy writing.
Bye.